Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Jerusalem is put in a very tough spot as the Ayatollahs in Tehran are offered a lifeline from both China and the United States. Meanwhile, Israel issuing a travel advisory warning amid threats of Iranian-backed terror attacks. And as Jews commemorate their exodus from Egypt in more ways than one, the Israeli National Library virtually publishing some of the oldest holiday prayer books in existence. The United States Biden administration is still working hard to bring Tehran back to the negotiating table with respect to its ongoing and advancing nuclear program. The White House now even offering to remove some sanctions immediately just to get Iran to slow down a little. A far cry from Biden's original hard line in which his administration vowed not to remove any sanctions until Iran returned to full compliance with the JCPOA nuclear deal. The United States now offering a massive lifeline to the economically struggling Ayatollah regime in Iran. Politico alleging that Washington is planning a new proposal under which Iran would see limited sanctions relief the moment they stop work on advanced centrifuges and stop enriching uranium to 20%. Both the advanced centrifuges and uranium enrichment past 3.5% being in violation of the 2015 JCPOA nuclear agreement. And Politico sources close to the matter are explaining that the offer is, quote, more than anything intended to get the conversation started, as there have not yet been any direct talks between Washington and Tehran. This also coming just days after President Biden's virtual meeting with leaders from the EU, in which they discussed Iran among other issues. But Iran continuing to play its hand, rejecting Washington's offer and maintaining that they won't stop their violations until all sanctions are lifted, a position that analysts expect isn't going anywhere. Especially as just days ago, United States officials suggested a softening on Tehran, saying that it's unimportant who first returns to compliance with the deal. Ironically, though, perhaps the best way to get Iran to slow or even stop its nuclear ambitions is to just maintain these same sanctions. International reports claiming that Iran's only functioning civilian power plant, Bushehr, is facing shutdown this year over the banking restrictions imposed by the United States under President Trump. Deputy of Iran's Atomic Energy Organization, Mahmoud Jafari, explaining that currency fluctuations and problems relating to banking sanctions have complicated efforts to meet the reactor's operational and maintenance costs, as well as to make payments to Russian contractors. Perhaps the most alarming to Israel, however, is not the lifeline offered by Washington, but by Beijing. The Chinese and Iranian foreign ministers on Saturday signing a 25-year cooperation agreement, reportedly including Chinese investment in key sectors like energy and infrastructure, and this making good on a 2016 agreement to boost bilateral trade by about $600 billion over a decade.
全面战略伙伴关系发表联合声明，双方同意达成一份全面合作计划。经过沟通商谈，不久前双方就全面合作计划内容达成一致。3月27日，王毅国务委员兼外长在应邀对伊朗进行正式访问期间，同伊朗外长扎里夫共同签署了中伊全面合作计划。
But the deal also reportedly includes commitments to joint military cooperation, training, research, and intelligence sharing. Former IDF military intelligence chief and current head of the INSS, Amos Yadlin, saying that on a fundamental level, China opposes an Iranian nuclear bomb, but on the other hand, isn't helping to stop Iran. Yadlin adding that Iran needs China's political support to stop the U.S. from pressuring it, and that the Chinese understand that they can be more aggressive with Biden than they were with Trump. That said, many experts are looking at the China-Iran deal critically, saying that while China wants cheap oil, they won't risk other more important or even more lucrative ties for the Ayatollah's sake. With me now for more on the evolving ties between the United States, China, Israel, and Iran is founder and executive director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman. Dr. Sherman, long time no see. Thank you so much for being with us again. I have to ask, how do you think that this new deal between China and Iran might complicate international efforts to curb Iran's nuclear program, or their military actions for that matter, or hegemonic ambitions?
Well, the short answer is immensely. I think that this underscores again the full catastrophe of the election of the Biden regime who seem to insist that they can convert a man-eating tiger by offering them high-quality carrots. It's perhaps significant that this deal has been announced just after the summit in Alaska, where the Chinese perceived far-reaching American weakness and hesitancy. Perhaps one of the interesting things is what is going to happen to Chinese policy on the Uyghurs now that they've become best buddies with the Islamic Republic of Iran. But that's perhaps just a footnote. I think it's difficult to overstate how severe this may be potentially, not only in the obvious sphere of how this will bolster Iranian military presence, and perhaps even in the Syria deployment, but it will complicate Israel with its relationship with China. Israel may be now faced with a very cruel dilemma. What is it going to do with Chinese involvement in all these large infrastructure programs within Israel if Peking is so close with a strategic relationship with Tehran? So, as I said, as to your question, how will this complicate the international dealing with Tehran? It will complicate it immensely.
Well, so to follow up,
for Tehran.
So to follow up, though, a lot of critics are saying that China will not suffer a nuclear Iran, and that they want cheap oil, but they're not willing to imperil more important interests for that. Would you agree with that, or do you think that that's just wordplay?
Well, I think that would have been far more credible than the previous administration, because I think the current administration has shown that it's going to be weak on Tehran, offering more and more goodies just to coax them back to the table. And who knows what complications there will be with Biden and his commercial involvement in China, particularly with his family. The New York Post expose of Hunter Biden's dealing with the Chinese raises serious concerns how harsh Biden can really be with the Chinese. So I think there's room for grave concern here.
All right, Dr. Martin Sherman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Moving along, as coronavirus infections continue to steadily decline, many Israelis are eagerly waiting to take flight. But the Israeli National Security Council is getting in the way with some new travel warnings. On Monday, the council advising Israelis against traveling to the United Arab Emirates and other countries across the region, citing the threat of attack by Iran. The council's anti-terrorism office explaining that Iran plans to harm Israeli targets abroad. And many Israelis likely to be upset by this new update, though. Dubai seeing over 67,000 Israeli tourists just December alone, following the establishment of ties through the Abraham Accords. In any case, though, Israelis now looking cautiously at trips to the Gulf. Israel, for the first time ever, is preparing for the opposite, an influx of Muslim tourists from the Gulf, especially from the UAE, which has had the second most efficient vaccination program on earth, just behind Israel. And both Israel's tourism ministry and tourism industry working hard to make sure that the new visitors feel welcome. Officials estimating that Muslim tourists will soon become a significant percentage of the millions of tourists who visit Israel in normal years. All right, now President Reuven Rivlin starting now to plan his consultations with the various Knesset party leaders next week in efforts to cobble together a government and prevent fifth elections. And the meetings are set to be broadcast live to promote transparency, as was done for the first time in 2019. But what does transparency matter when the only thing that's truly clear is that Israel's ongoing political deadlock is ongoing? Well, joining me now to discuss is former Likud Knesset member and president of the Likud Supreme Court, Michael Kleiner, and former Labor Party Knesset candidate, Dr. Amir Kanifs. Thank you both so much for being with us. Dr. Kanifs, I'll start with you. Now, I have to ask you, President Rivlin is weighing right now only giving one person the mandate, explaining that given the deadlock, a second mandate is not necessary, especially if during these meetings he asks for second priorities. Do you think that that's fair? And who will get the first mandate, in your opinion?
Well, I am I'm not in a position that I can decide for all other parties, but what I can tell you that from our side is, as the Labour Party and the leader of the Labour Party, Merav Michaeli, I think that we will provide this support for the candidate who, from our camp, who's calling for a change. And it seems that for now being, at least, it seems that Yair Lapid has the most chances of forming such a government. I really hope that he will manage somehow to find the support that from other parties in our camp, and we all together can form such a government. And finally, we could be in a position where we can remove Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from the Balfour House.
Well, so, Michael, same question to you. Do you think that it's fair of the president to go against tradition and only give one person the mandate one time, or do you think that it's unfair given that parties might change their mind?
I believe it's not such an important question. The question is who is able to form a government. I believe the best chance is Benjamin Netanyahu. There are 63 members of Knesset who are not committed to the anti-Netanyahu policy. He got the most number of votes. He won the election by far in the second round of election when Blue and White got one seat more than the Likud. Despite the fact that Likud has the overall majority for the blocs, they said we won the election, and the whole press and media followed suit. And now, so Netanyahu got 30 seats, the second one 17, and everybody else less than 10. So it's a clear choice of Netanyahu. He has 52 people who positively will recommend him. It is the biggest number. Of course, Yair Lapid, I would be very happy if Yair Lapid is allowed to form a government because he has no chance. I believe he doesn't intend really to being asked by the president to form a government because he has most of the members of the Knesset declared that they will not support him. I believe it's a smokescreen.
So far you've had Labour, you've had Meretz, you've had some of the Arab parties who have come out publicly saying that they intend to, the joint list rather, saying that they intend to vote for Lapid. Really, the only people on the fence are the Haredi parties, UTJ and Shas, who are saying, at least for now, that they're planning to back Netanyahu, but there are internal rivalries. So do you really think that he would have the majority?
What is at least for now? They say that they support Netanyahu. On the other hand, the United Arab Front didn't say they support him. On the contrary, Balad said they will not support him. No one, and even Tibi's party is hesitating. So the only parties that support him are those who already declared, Labour, Meretz, and his own party. I believe, as I said, it's a smokescreen. They intend that the president will ask Bennett to form a government. Bennett will be recommended by his 7 and maybe also by Gantz and Gideon Saar's party, the New Hope. And but the president will say that he has the best chances. He may say he has the best chances. And that's why his alternative is either Netanyahu or Bennett. I believe it will be very unfair if you will ask Bennett, but he may do so. And at the end of the day, if Bennett will not be able to form a government, so the next stage is that every member of Knesset can provide 61 signatures to support him, will get 14 days from the president to form a government, and it's okay.
So, Dr. Kniefs, I'm going to turn it back to you. Do you really think that that Lapid can build a coalition of 61, considering that you still have Saar and Bennett who have not come out to support him and are saying that they won't support him?
No, Saar and Bennett say they will not support him, at least Bennett.
Well, I have to say, before we move to Lapid, I have to say that I'm really surprised of some of the statements that Mr. Kleiner just said. He's saying that Netanyahu achieved the majority in the last election, and he has already the 61 seats on his supporting him for forming a government. That's quite a surprise statement, given the fact that we all know that Benjamin Netanyahu is not even close to this time of these results. And but if he's going to form any type of government in the future or in the near future, that's going to be a very awkward government that basically bringing extremists from both sides on one government, and that's something quite impossible. And before we're talking about the government, I think it's something that is unfair for the Israeli public and for the sake of the state of Israel. By moving to Yair Lapid, I think that it depends what kind of agreements that Lapid would be able to bring on the table with Saar and Bennett.
So far, Bennett and Lapid are not even speaking to each other, because Bennett is saying that he wants to be prime minister, which it sounds like Lapid is not willing to give him. But unfortunately, I think we're going to have to finish this conversation another time. In the meantime, Dr. Kanif Michael Kleiner, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Speaking of elections, Islamist terrorist organization in Gaza, Hamas, unveiling its list of candidates for the upcoming Palestinian elections. The first elections in 15 years, with the legislative ballots set for May 22, followed by a presidential vote July 31. And in efforts to appear both more democratic and inclusive, the Hamas list is including a dozen women. This move effectively ending rumors, however, of a joint run between the Hamas in Gaza and President Abbas's Fatah party in the West Bank. Officials with the Palestinian Electoral Commission now saying that 15 factions have so far submitted lists, with 5 already approved. The rest are under review, and the approved lists are set to be unveiled to the public in full April 6. All right, Jews continuing Passover holiday celebrations this week, taking their newly regained freedoms in Israel into the Old City for a return to somewhat normal traditions. Chana Rifkin with the story.
Pesach, or Passover, the Jewish Holy Week commemorating the Jews' escape from slavery in ancient Egypt, as recounted in the book of Exodus. And this year, in a modern take on the story, Israelis celebrating the holiday with an exodus from coronavirus lockdowns. Hundreds of worshippers donning face masks and heading to the Western Wall in Jerusalem Monday and Tuesday for a special recitation of the Birkat HaKohanim, or the priestly blessing. The event usually attracting thousands. Last year, just 10 were allowed.
Thanks God that we are able in this year to be here in Passover to get the blessings of the Kohanim that a year ago it wasn't possible. Now everybody that was here, he got blessings from hundreds of Kohanim. And from here we bless all Am Yisrael, all over the world.
Meanwhile, it's not just the religious taking advantage of renewed freedoms. Israelis across the country of all faiths enjoying the holiday as the infection rate, now below 1%, continues to drop thanks to Israel's vaccine drive. Active infections likewise falling to a little under 8,300. The police now even instructing officers to stop enforcing mask mandates outdoors, while the Knesset allows the Shin Bet's controversial contact tracing program to expire.
Completely different. A year ago, everything was closed down. We saw the Pesach. Passover was so sad and alone, and now came back to full life, and we're so blessed.
Everything changed.
Yeah.
And now I can celebrate in a restaurant with my children and my grandchildren, and we've gone back to a normal life, pretty well almost normally. And we hear that the situation can be a bit more difficult in Europe and in England, and we feel sorry for you, but we're pleased that we made the move to come here.
Look, today it's beautiful. It's just something that we've been waiting for a long time. We've gone through 3 lockdowns now. There's always a 4th lockdown hanging over us, but for now we're enjoying freedom. We're enjoying being out in the sun and just waiting to go to the beach. And summer is just around the corner, so we're all very excited. But it does feel good, and it's a little bit deceiving, but it feels great. I mean, things are not going to be normal so quickly, but it's the sense of normal that feels good.
We feel pretty good now that everything seems to start opening. It's been a long time since we went outside the entire family, and it feels like we're coming back to life. It's very good. The kids had enough at home. They want outside.
Now, every year on Passover or Pesach, Jews recite the story of their exodus from Egypt as written in the Haggadah prayer book. And just in time for this year's holidays, Israel's National Library digitally unveiling its collection of Haggadot, young and old, to the world. So how has this treasured text evolved throughout the centuries, though? Well, here to discuss is Rabbi Ari Kahn, author, public speaker, and lecturer at Bar-Ilan University. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, Rabbi, what is some of the rich history behind the creation of the Haggadah, and how long have we been using them around the Seder table?
Well, we've been using some form of it almost as far back as we can go. But I would assume, like many things involving liturgy, there was a change that took place. Anshe Knesset Agdola help us form one level of it. And the truth is, if you look at the Mishnah, you'll see already, I would say, the backbone, or the spine, as it were, of the Haggadah is right there. But when we went into exile, when we no longer had a temple, and when the actual celebration changed, without the temple being the focus of it, I think the Haggadah changed significantly at that point.
So how else has the Haggadah evolved over the centuries, though? Because I know just a brief look at the virtual library, I saw everything from satirical Haggadot about, the Tel Aviv Haggadah from 1930 something, all the way to, the Beijing Haggadah, and really just incredible variances.
Well, there's a couple of issues. One is commentaries, and one is the art, and one is the text itself. I mean, if you think for a moment just about the art, when the artist is going to depict the wicked child, or the wicked son, as it were, and by the way, in almost all the old Haggadot, it's not a child, it's somebody who's grown up, they're showing you the individual that they think is not really acceptable within the Jewish community. And there's a commentary in that. And that's going to evolve within each artist, or for that matter, each community. And that's one of the things that's very easy to see this change. And it's more so than the text itself. But you look at one of the very earliest texts, the Halach Ma'anya. And we say in that text, we are in exile. Next year we'll be free. Next year we'll be home. Now we're away from our home. So you realize, of course, that's the kind of text that came into being when we were in exile. So going into exile changed the Passover experience. Certainly when you're talking about liberation, it became something much more of our imagination. And the text continued to evolve throughout the Middle Ages. I mean, one of let's say the last part of the Haggadah, the Haggadah, that's relatively late. That's a late text that was added into it, which also, in a certain sense, the Haggadah tells us the long story of the Jewish exile and all the trials and tribulations.
So are there other religious Jewish texts that have undergone a similar evolution?
Well, the evolution is the good word. I mean, even though sometimes religious Jews have a hard time with it, I think we're easier with evolution than revolution. I mean, for example, the Friday night prayer, the Kabbalat Shabbat, that is a Kabbalistic prayer from the 16th century. That was something which was unknown before then, and somehow just snuck into almost every Jewish community. So yeah, texts do tend to respond to the reality of the Jewish experience, but as you said, much more in an evolutionary process than in, I would call, the revolutionary process.
Wow. All right. Rabbi Kahn, thank you so much for being with us, and happy holidays.
Chag Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
My pleasure.
All right, now let's take a look at the weather forecast with Chana Rifkin.
Nice tie today, Aaron. Spring is slowly budding. Tonight and into tomorrow, Israel's calling for partly cloudy skies. This evening, calling for lows in the 40s and lower 50s, or between 6 to 12 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow, temperature highs will range in the 60s, or 17 to 25 degrees Celsius.
Thanks for noticing my wonderful tie today, Chana. And now, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. Oh yeah, one of Israel's billions of street cats getting that beach body. Oh God. Never seen that before. All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.33 shekels to the American dollar and 2.64 shekels to the Canadian dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And then don't forget to visit the all-new and improved ILTV website at iltv.tv and to subscribe to our newsletter for the latest updates while you're there, as well as to our breaking news Telegram channel. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.